A blast from my crew.
A 1, 2, yeah. 1, 2, hop. A 1, 2, yeah. 1, 2, 2. A 1, 2, yeah. 1, 2, 2. A 1, 2.
This is the LFS Editor. It's a free program that's used for creating vehicle mods in LFS. If you've never used any 3D modeling software before, don't worry. This is the right video for you. There are 3 routes you can go to build your car mod. Number 1, pick from mods available on LFS.net. Browsing the mod list, you may find a car model you want to build has already been uploaded online. Going down to the bottom of the mod page, you can check if the creator of the mod allows others to use his model. If derivatives are allowed, you can download the model and re-upload with your own specs and changes. There's a lot of pros to this route. An instantly functional texture mod gives a huge head start in the modding process. Although, beware that taking on someone else's project can expose some bad modeling practices and may leave you with a lot of work fixing the mod before re-uploading. Number 2, pick from models available online. There may be areas online that sell or can provide free model assets to use in LFS. Sketchfab.com, for example, hosts a large selection of user-submitted 3D models. From a gift shop made from a washed-up shipwreck, a Minecraft-style cathedral, outer space, and other things, there's a lot of options that can get you started. The last option is to build from scratch. Now, this may seem daunting at first, but when you download the editor, the LFS original cars are included to view and use parts from. Along with Reflux.world, we have a ton of free parts available that can help make the task a little easier. In this guide, we're going to be using option 1. If you're new, building off a community car mod is the best way to get some experience with the editor. We can use the Reflux.world build guide to make it easy to find an open derivative car to build. When you've found a car you like, continue to the mod page to download the original files. Once the car is finished downloading, locate your LFS Editor folder and begin dragging the files over. Now we can dive into working with the LFS Editor. We have successfully downloaded a car mod from LFS.net, and we can begin working on the car to see what we'll need to fix, what we need to add, and how we want the finished mod to look. But before we begin working on our car, we'll need to get the basics down first. We'll open the modeler. Here we'll go through the layout of the program and learn about the 8 edit modes. So we have subob, which is subobject mode. We have try, which is your triangle mode. Point, which is your point mode. Build, your build mode. Now mapping is your texture mapping mode. Cutout is your texture cutout mode. Page is your texture page mode. And view is your view mode. We'll just be covering these basics. If you'd like to learn more, you can check out our other videos in the links below. So I've loaded up one of the default LFS cars here. So I have the LX6. So we can use one of the default cars here to get an idea of how we should be making our own mods. So going into points, we can see that points are used to make up the entire model. That's what connects all these triangles that make up a mesh. The most elementary part of a 3D model is the point, which is a single point in 3D space. An edge always connects 2 points by a straight line. They're used to construct triangles. And then triangles, often abbreviated to tries, are used to build the actual surface of the object. They're what you see when you render the mesh. So as a little test, let's try building with the editor here. So we'll start with points. We'll click new point. There's no points here yet. So we're going to need points to build our triangles on. So we'll do a new point here. I'm just going to move this off the center. Let's duplicate that point. Then I can drag that point out. So every time you duplicate a point, you're already selected on that new point, overlapping the original. So you can start dragging with these sliders. And these sliders here will keep you locked for each axis. So this one here is front and back. This one's only left and right. Sorry, this one here, left and right. And this one here is only up and down. I can't go front and back with this one. Keeps everything locked. So now that we have 3 points, I'm going to go into build mode and going counterclockwise. I'm going to click the points in order. So 1, 2, 3, and then you'll make a triangle. Continuing that, you can duplicate another point. I'll press T to go into my top view. And let's make a perfect box. So I want this point to be exactly in line with this point. So let's see, so it's point, where is it, forward, it's negative 0.103 meters forward. So I'll click back to this one, right click on forward. There you go. And these are a little off from each other. I'll change this one. 183. And I'll do build mode again, counterclockwise. And there we go, now we have a square. Now if we control Z and if I did it the other way, so if I went clockwise, you'll see once I make the triangle, there's actually nothing there. So that's actually flipping it, so it made the triangle on this side instead underneath it. So whichever way that you build that triangle, that's the way that it'll be orientated when it's done. If I go to triangles and I'm selected on it now, I can do Control F to flip it over. Now that we know how to make triangles and we know how to make a flat square, let's elevate that by making a 3D cube. So we'll go back to our points, new point. I'm going to duplicate this point and move it 5 meters to the right. We're going to then hold Control, and then we can hold right click and make a box around both points. Duplicate both points, and now we have both of these new duplicated points selected. We can drag them forward, and while we have them selected, we can click over here into our forward and back box, and we'll click 5. So we're 5 meters forward in all directions, 5 meters to the right. So we should have a 5 meter cube. Now there's a new technique here I want to show you. So if we hold Control and left click all our points in order, make sure you go around the perimeter. We have trace over here. So we can do off, include, or exclude that final point is what that's meaning. So we're going to do include. You can see now it made that box. We have 3 orange lines. We have the 1 red line. And then what we want is extrude. So we have a couple options with the LFS Editor. So not as in depth as Blender or other programs, but we have a couple things. So we can extrude. So now it gives us a few options. So we can have open, which is the orange only, or close, which is the orange plus that red, that final red line that we've seen. So we want a closed full box. Well, I'll show you open here now. So we'll just do open. We'll say add triangles. We want them to face the outside. We'll click OK. And then you can see we have some problems. So 6 triangles are too small. So it actually made triangles. And right now we haven't moved. So they're all kind of inside of each other. So if I start dragging up, you'll see that these are triangles now being created. We're extruding triangles from those points we just selected. But you can see we just clicked orange. So the red line that we had over here has no triangles. So it leaves that box open. So we can go as high as we want then. You can make, your points go up, extrude again. You can do this as much as you want. Start doing curves and all that. But we don't want that. We want a full cube. So I'm just going to Control Z, go back down to here. And now that we're back to where we were, I'm going to extrude again. And instead I'm going to click orange plus red. So now when I go up, you can see we have a full cube all the way around. I'm going to make sure in my up box, I'm going to click 5. So we have a perfect 5 by 5 by 5 cube. And then what we can do again is we can extrude that again, orange plus red outside. But now I'd like to go and cover the top. I want everything to kind of go together. So what you can do is you can click average or green, and this is merging. So it takes all these points now and we'll merge it to either the average between these points, which will be the center of a square. If we go back, I can do to green, and green will actually merge all these points to green, which is our selected point, which saves a little bit of triangles. As you can see, if we went average, we'd have 4 triangles wasted on top just for a flat top. But if we go green, we only have 2. 2 can make a square. Make sure everything's good. And now just to complete it, go underneath, look down at the bottom here, and our last 4, I might just go into build mode, and we can do our counterclockwise, make a triangle there, and make a triangle there. You can press C to clear your selection, and now we have a fully done 3D cube in 3D space. Now there's smooth groupings, and we don't really want a smooth box. We want this to be a nice flat cube. So if we go into groups, these corners, all these faces are all one color in this smooth grouping visual. So over here in the top, we have a 1 that can use. It's blinking at us. So we can keep her in 0 for now. We're going to hold control and we can paint. So once we start clicking, if we keep holding our click, we can move along these faces and select them. So now we all have selected. I can let go of control. It's all fine. They'll stay selected. I'm going to click this 1. And now it's asking me, should I assign 4 triangle groups to group 1? I'm going to click yes. And now these sides have now turned red. So if I click C again, clear my selection, go back to my goo rod, which is just my 3D kind of visual with the light. You can see now there's a hard edge. So we've created a hard edge for the physics, for the environment, to know that I don't want that to try to be smoothed, like the surface of a car body might want to be all nice and smooth. Sometimes you want a hard edge between, certain corners and stuff. So now we do the same thing, go back to groups. I'm going to do this side as well. I'm going to go over to this side, same thing. I'm going to do another new group. So assign 4 triangles to a new group. Yep. And now we have 2, which is the green. So now if we go back to or we stay in our group, actually, if we look under, right, nothing is touching the same color. And you can see that we have a flat cube. There's no smoothing now. It's very obvious. You can see that they're grouped in triangles. You have your groups down here. And I can change the color of our cube. Just makes it easier to look at. Now you can really kind of see that it's a flat cube. Flat orange cube. Using the orange cube we just created, we're going to make a archway. There's another technique I want to show you here. So what we'll do, we'll use our points. If you look at your bottom distance reference, we can see that there's an arrow pointing forward. So if you're building a car, obviously you would face the front of the car towards that forward arrow so you know what direction you're building in. But what we'll do is we'll just select our points and move them off the center. We want it kind of over here to the side. You can see your bottom distance reference will expand to suit how far you're going out of that distance. So we'll go there. We'll just, something arbitrary. We'll say 5 meters to the right, as long as it's not on this center line. Because as you can see, what we'll do is we'll duplicate one of these points. I'm going to click center point. So that will move this point right to 0. And I'm going to go to triangles. We'll delete the top of the cube. So you can just select, press delete key on your keyboard. And then we're going to go back to points. So now we have a point here in the middle using our top triangles, right? If I press F for my front view, we can look at it in this orientation. We can see we're perfectly in line with these top points. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, hold control, do our counterclockwise circle, make a circle of all these points. And then I'm going to hold control and then click this point off to the center. And then we're going to want to do that exclude feature. Instead of include like we did last time, we're going to exclude that point. So you can see that if we include it, we get this weird cube, kind of the lines all want to go to this point. It kind of screws up our nice cube. So if we exclude that one point, we'll keep our nice cube over here, as long as this is our last point that we selected. But instead of doing extrude, which we can, same thing, if you extrude, we can do orange plus red. We can see, same thing, we're just using this point as kind of a reference point. Here we'll go back. I'm going to do lathe. So if I go my front view and I do lathe, we can click lathe and we'll do steps, we'll just say 10. What do we want to do? We just want to go 90 degrees. We want it to be the orange and the red and outside. Let's see. So no, wrong direction. So Control Z will go back, our back view. Same thing, glaives keeps all our settings. We'll click OK again, and there we go. So it rotates based off which way you're looking at it, counterclockwise around that point again. So if we go back to P now, you'll see we've just created a perfect 90 from here to here, from here to here, around this point. It's a perfect 90-degree arch as you're laving something, right? It's all circular. So we've made a perfect 90-degree archway from our original cube. Again, we can go in the groups. You can see it reset our group mapping. So what we'll do is we can hold Control again and then paint, hold, click, paint up the wall, paint up the wall. I'm gonna make this red. And you can Control Shift click a group that's separate on its own to click the whole thing on its own. Same thing over here, Control Shift click that on its own. And we're gonna make this green. And now what I wanted to do earlier, the reason I put this to center and we move it off to the side, we can only have to do half the model. Same when you're making a car, you only have to complete half the car and then you mirror the other side. So what we'll do here now is we'll press F, go down our center view. I'm going to make that control box again and just select all our center points and just click over here, make them center. Instead of free, we'll lock them into center. So they all turn yellow. And now we'll go back to our triangles again. You can press A to select all your triangles that are visible. And we'll click mirror. So mirror will mirror along the center axes of whatever sub-object. So the main will always be at 0, 0 right there. So if we do mirror, you can see it mirrors right along this, invisible plane right through the center of your M. You can see now, we can go grow. We have a nice orange half view little arch that we've created. And it's all grouped properly. You can see everything lines up nicely. Now that you know the basics of building in the LFS Editor, we can get to work on the car we downloaded. So now that we have the basics underneath our belt, we're actually going to go to the vehicle editor. And here, when we download our car, we can click load, and you'll see our car pops up in this menu. So this is all cars or full mods that you have downloaded on your machine. This also comes with the stock LFS assets right at the bottom here. So I'm sorting by date, obviously. So if we go like LX4, load that. This is the LX4 like in the game. This is the exact LX4 that they use. We can get the race about. This is the exact race about that's in the game. So everything you need to know. Pressing E for edit again would show you exactly like any other car mod. This is made the same way. This is just the LFS developers have kind of given us an insight into how they go about modeling. So you can kind of use this as a guide. If you have any questions, you can come in here and say, well, how did they do the steering wheel? How did they do their gauges? How have they set up their cars in a way that I can kind of copy that and kind of learn from that? So it's nice that that's included. And we are Silly 13 up, so I'm going to load that. So this is the car we downloaded. This is a Ruby mod. So he did a great job on this, but there's obviously going to be a few things that we're going to run into. Downloading someone else's car, obviously, you're going to run into someone else's project. You may find there's some issues that you're not exactly happy with. So if you look in here in the wheel well, I can already see the seats are sticking through the wheel well. We had a few errors here. Pressing H will show you there's a few errors in the LOD1. We'll get into that, but there's some triangles that are too thin. Mainly that's actually not too bad, but it's just thin triangles where the detail got a little too small for LFS. And triangles are kind of overlapping each other. Just kind of creates wonky things. It's not great. Interior looks good. I'll be showing you guys how to model your own stereo and kind of get a perspective view on your texture mapping. Some people are running into issues on that. But other than that, everything looks pretty good. So we have a little bit of work to do. Now, before we jump in, this is the main thing for me is I like to get some inspiration. I kind of have a build plan in mind. So I already have a few links here on Google. So you can look online. You can look up. I looked up 90s 1via. I want to do something simple, something easy that I can show you guys fairly quickly all the different areas of the editor. But pretty easily, 90s 1via, and I'm just scrolling through Google. Lots of options here now. As time goes on, old magazines, there's a lot of that posted. Pinterest is a good spot. You'll find a lot of inspiration here. But this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking something small wheel, a little more stock body. I might do some skirts. Maybe we'll do a little wing. And then from Reflux World, from our own stuff, I'll probably put in a kit, maybe a few seats. We have a few wheel options to choose from. So it makes it very easy to go in and start modifying right away. So we can just get right into that now. We'll go through a little quick cover here of this little beginning editor area. So like up here, you'll see you have a lot of options in the top left. So we'll just go in order. Here we have class and inputs. So this is your lights, indicators, your flashers, rear fog light, extra light. So these can all be functions. Pretty much all of them can be functions to be for, like, you can have spinners, you can have things happen when certain things turn on, you can have lights mapped, so lights will actually turn on in game. So I'll give you a little idea of that. So we obviously have pop-ups on the 1via. So if I do lights and I turn my side indicators on, there's no side indicators, but you could have side indicators turn on. I thought one of these would turn on. But when I go low beams, you can see that low beams are mapped to the rotation of the lights. So anytime you do lows, they'll turn on. And then when you go high beams, in behind here. So this is the thing about someone else's car, is things don't really work sometimes perfectly. So you might have to go in and change a few things. But so this is high beams. And if you see low beams, behind this texture, it actually is mapped to the headlights. So you can see I'm going high beams, low beams, and inside for a second there, you see it turns off as the lights fold in on themselves. So it's pretty cool. Indicators the same way. You can test left, right, and all for your hazard lights. So these are all mapped to indicators, which is pretty cool. They all work. We can turn that off. Flashing. So this is when you flash. There's a button, liver speed, that you can map just for flashing your headlights. So the flashing is mapped to obviously putting the lights up, and you see they're flashing on before they get up to the fully up position. Rear fog lights. I'm not sure if we have a rear fog light that's mapped to anything. There's an extra light, and that's not mapped to anything. But we can maybe get into that. I can actually show a little example of that. Sirens and stuff. If you have a maybe a police build, ambulance, medical, something of that nature, you can have a siren. Maybe a spinning light on top. All that good stuff. So that's pretty cool. Class inputs are a cool little area. And I believe vehicle type here, right? Yeah, so vehicle type, touring car. So you have a bunch of options here. So you kind of want to make sure you have this selected to be somewhat corresponding to what you've built. You might build anything, really. So it is kind of a little difficult maybe if it doesn't quite fit, but it gives you everything. So you have like object, prototype if it's something completely out of there, some race car you've just come up with, bus, big buses, F1, FSAE, truck, van, bikes, carts, you name it, GT and formulas, buggies. So you have a lot of options to pick from. So that's really good. But when you set that option for your vehicle type, when you go in game and you want to sort by that option, then you won't get buggies when you're trying to look for road cars. You won't get you won't get open wheel formula cars when I'm trying to look for a street car. It's kind of makes everything organized. So that's a good thing to keep an eye out for when you kind of done your whole car and you're finally finished. You built this Formula 1 car and you forget to change this to F1, and it's auto set to saloon or something. Is going to be a little weird, and the reviewers may not like that. So you might get denied just because you forgot. So something to look out for. Transmission and audio. So we'll start with transmission. So transmission H pattern gearbox, which allows people to use their H patterns on your car, which this makes sense as a street car is probably 5-speed S13. But you have a lot of options. You could put a motorbike gearbox, so you have to actually downshift first to go, or sequential gearbox, obviously, just to allow you to use paddles, or you can just click upshift. It makes it a lot easier. Ignition cut, you can include ignition cut. Paddle shift, there's the paddle shifts. Electric motor, centrifugal clutch, everything. So we actually made an RC car. Sorry, I actually made the RC car is actually electric motor, but we made a go-kart. And the go-kart was like one you would build with a little lawnmower engine kind of thing. So that had centrifugal clutch on it. You know, no reverse. And putting in gear, it kind of like to burn the clutch out because it's centrifugal, right? So you have to kind of give it full throttle to let it expand and grab. So it's kind of cool. It simulates a lot of that stuff, but we're going to stick with H pattern for this one. Drivetrain, obviously. No drive. You can select that. Rear wheel drive, we're going to keep it rear wheel drive, obviously, for this chassis, but you can go front wheel drive, four wheel drive if you are making up this crazy swap build in your head. It's kind of nice to try to keep stuff looking visually the way that you've modified it. So if you're going for a front wheel drive here, or four wheel drive, indicating something maybe in some sort of like model something that indicates that you've done a bunch of work to this car. Now this is the full build. You'd have to model something that kind of shows, or if you're making it this off-road build that's jacked up or something, maybe you model kind of an undercarriage that shows that you've kind of done a lot of work or something. Just something to kind of, it's all virtual. You can do whatever you want, but it's nice to try to make stuff look like it actually fits what you're selecting. So going down, then number of forward gears, so you have five speed, and then you have a reverse. But we can make this 7 if you want. You can make it 1 forward gear, really, if you just want 1 gear. So a reverse gear ratio of -4, obviously, but the other way. So then reverse gear ratio 4. I think that's accurate. Don't quote me, but I think that's an accurate gear ratio. So when you're in game, you'll actually have a proper reverse. You probably won't have to run into any issues about low power. You can drive all the other 5 gears when you're driving, but when you go to reverse, if your reverse ratio is all screwed up, it doesn't even want to reverse. There's no power or something, so keep an eye on that. Same way, your gear ratios and stuff. You can choose to have a shift light, engine damage light. So that stuff will be on your gauges. Traction control, obviously, you can have that as an option. And then when you include traction control, like if I add this now, you'll see now here in brakes for your setup, you have brakes/TC. You have the option over here to the right for traction control. You can turn it on. And then there's some options here for allowed slip percentage and minimum speed you have to be driving at for that to take effect and all that. So I'm going to keep it raw. I'm going to keep it pretty bare bones with this car. I like it to be a little more driver focused. Engine brake reduction, you can turn that on. This is also another feature that pops in here at the bottom. Engine brake reduction percentage, you can kind of mess with that. And engine sound file. So while you're in the game, if you press Shift A, you have some options to modify the engine sound file in Live for Speed. So what you can do is you can kind of make your own sound files. They are a little maybe old school, I would say. It's an older game. So this one here is SR20 Mako. We can look at this one. I got a bunch of sounds myself that I've just kind of made over the years. So F3000 V8, I got a Miata, Bunny engine stuff, B16. So there's a lot of options that I've kind of accumulated, and that you can also, kind of experiment for yourself what you like to listen to and what you think is cool. But that's all in game. So if you go in Live for Speed, drive around in Shift A, right, and mess with your sound, save that file, and then you bring that file back to the editor so you can re-upload it back onto your mod. So before we go to the wheel object, I just decided to swap the wheels out because the original wheels that Ruby had on was using a different technique. So I'll show you all this now. So now we'll go to the wheel object. I clicked load wheel. So from Reflex World, I just finished some Mark IIs and Mark IIIs, some SSRs for the site. So I have these all queued up here. So I'm going to try to run some Mark IIs 15-inch. So that's what I have loaded here now. And we'll just go through. I'll show you how to do lugs and stuff later. There's a triangle limit when you make wheels or when you upload wheels. So the max you can have for the triangles is 4,240. So I try to use no lugs on my wheels to try to maximize the quality of the wheel. And then after, I'll show you now for a hub object, which is a sub object that spins with your wheel. I put lugs there, so I'll show you all that. We'll get into it. But anyway, so wheel object, we're here. So if you do reflect wheels to left side, so that will make sure that each wheel on the right side, say you had a pattern, you know, if you had a wheel that wasn't so straight, if I do, let's see, maybe we'll do these, the BBSs. So if I reflect, you can see the logo, right? If I don't reflect, it's taking that wheel and actually turning it, you know, 180 and then putting it on the left side. But if I do reflect that wheel, it is taking the same direction that these wheels are and reflecting them like a mirror, right? So your LFS logo is backwards on this side, but then on this side it's straight. They're both facing, the S is facing the front. Groove slicks, I believe just a visual. Let me see here. We don't have it on. I'm just going to allow slicks. Okay, so with groove slicks, I turn that on. So if you allow, right, we kind of got into a different area there, but if I allow my minimum type of wheel to be slicks, then here in my settings at the bottom, I can turn on slicks, right? It allows players to have slicks on cars. It's probably not a good idea to have slicks allowed on your road car. That's kind of the consensus, keeping the road cars just with road supers as kind of a max grip level. But if you were doing slicks on a different car, you can turn on groove slicks or no, right? It's more of a flat slick, so this might be good for a drag car, of something more modern. But if you're making something a little older, it's a nice visual for an older F1 car maybe or something. It's the groove slicks. So we're going to leave that off. I'm just going to go back here and turn that back to supers, because I don't want to give the option for slicks on this car. It's just a street car. You have the option for, again, visual. So this is solid or drilled brakes. You can see behind there, they change. And we're going to load these wheels back. Let me put them back on. Front wheel size. So you get into your actual wheel build here now. So you can have the width of your tire, the ratio, the rim diameter, and the rim width. So this is all pretty basic stuff. So I can make the wheel nice and wide if I want. It gets a little funky. So I think a 205 is cool for a 15. I might go with a 50 ratio, something a little smaller, and we'll go with usually an 8-inch wide is pretty fine. So I'll match that for the rear. The rear right now is running 230s. I might just go with a square setup, just something easy. We'll see. We'll come back to this later. So they are pretty small, but we'll see where the car sits. We'll get into it. So yeah, so you can get your actual inch in diameter, full diameter, tread diameter. So that's kind of cool. It gives you some options if you're copying some specs from online, you know. So this is front and rear wheel styles. So this is to edit the rim and edit the spoke. So I just went all through the spoke editor. So if you do edit spoke, you're actually in the wheel editor here now. So if I go to my triangles, you can see that we've built the wheel all in the wheel editor. So that's pretty cool. But you can see you can turn on a guide. So if I actually hide my main, there's a guide here to show you kind of a rough idea of what you might want to build your wheel to. You can turn that off, and then you just have the tire. And you can show rim, but I have no rim on this, so I'll show you right now. If I go back out and I go edit rim, there's kind of this rim editor side view thing. So I won't get into it too much, but you can do a new point, and then see now you're in your side space. So you're looking at the wheel kind of from a front on kind of view. So if you do surface and then click 2 points, you can see that this surface is pointing outwards. And we've just made, if I edit my spoke, I'm going to delete all these points. You can see we'll start to make a rim. So I'm going to just make it white so it's easier to see. And the rim editor is kind of nice because it allows you to make a flawless rim kind of for the wheel that will always connect to your surface of the tire. So it is kind of a nice bonus, but sometimes it's difficult to get the triangles. You can't connect your spoke triangles to your rim triangles. It's kind of its own separate thing. It's 2 different areas. So if I do edit rim, I'll move this camera over so you can see, but you can watch, like I can drag this back, I can push it outwards. So you kind of see this yellow outline view. That's your kind of your rough idea of where the rim should be. So I can go out first, maybe follow that. New point. I'll go down here, a surface here. So you can see we start to create this kind of lip. You can see you've now made a rim for a wheel, and you can quickly and easily just select these points. You can hold control, select a bunch of points, and move this whole thing to whatever you want. You know, you can make little donut wheels just from your rim pretty much. And the same thing, surfaces, same as your groupings. If you click surface, you see your smoothing group up here is 0. So if I go 1, you can see that 1 is different to all these other ones are default to 0. So this 1 now will be a nice hard kind of edge from the other ones. But if I put it back to 0, it's going to try to smooth that, make it look like a donut going inwards. So that's what it actually looks like. If I change the grouping, the game is not trying to mathematically calculate this smoothing wheel. We'll keep going where the brake discs. So this is for, I believe, the front. Yeah. So this is your offset and your disc radius. So it can only go as far out as 60 offset from your hub area when you do your suspension. But I can change the size. So if I right click or if I left click it, I can do kind of small increments. But you can choose your kind of your rotor sizes. So we'll put this back in here. It's going to need to be deeper in the wheel because these are a more higher offset wheel that I'm using here now. So you can see the brakes are clipping through the wheel. So we'll change that in a second just to make sure everything looks good. And what we'll do is rear wheel size. We'll do match front. Set rear wheel dimensions to match front wheels. I'll click yes. So now I don't have to modify them separately. I can just do the top here, and you can see both wheels will update on their own. So we're doing a square setup, which we might come back and change. Or if you'd like, you can do a different wheel style. So allow front and rear wheels to have different styles. So maybe I go with for a rear wheel style. So you can see now there's two, front wheel style and rear wheel style. So this is now load wheel for the rear. So what if I did a Mark III for the rear? So I could have a mismatch kind of setup. I actually think I want the opposite. So I want Mark IIs in the rear, and I'll do Mark IIIs in the front. These now will both be on M2, right? So see if I both go red, they're both changing to be red because they're both mapped to the same M color. So you have 4 colors. You can see on the left here, different things are mapped. So my pop-ups are mapped to M4 down here. It goes 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's a pretty cool little feature. I'll take a look at my reference. So my reference just has the gunmetal kind of gray. So I'll just make them full white. And for visibility, we can say open wheel or inside covered. So if you say inside covered, the inside gets dark. It puts a shadow on the wheel. So the game goes, okay, well, your insides are covered. If you have anything with fenders, that it covers the wheel. But if you did an open wheeler, what that is telling the game is, again, when you do open wheel, it's going to make the insides of the wheels bright because there would be no shadow when it's open. And that's pretty much it. I mean, other than that, we have rim protector. So you can see it's a couple options for the wheel. So you can have more of a stiffer sidewall, or this kind of rounds it to be makes it almost look like it tucks into the wheel a little differently. More of kind of like a chunky, kind of a nice meaty tire look. So that's it for wheel object. But let's get into suspension. So this is kind of the spot. I have another video on this that you can check out. Kind of dives deep into it. But there's a few key things you really want to look after. I'll go through the list here. So we got suspension diagram. So these are your 2 top kind of main things that just show you what your suspension is doing. So suspension diagram, this is from a front on view. So you can kind of get an idea. The front is McPherson strut and the rear is actually double wishbone. And that's all we have as options. I'll show you here now. Convert the front to linear to show you. So this is rigid, linear, front fork. Linear is for just a straight up and down. You can kind of, if you don't have the suspension that you need, or there's not for a real life kind of conversion, you know, you got to kind of do a workaround, maybe use one of these other ones, or you can just do linear. McPherson strut. So that got kind of screwed up. So I'll go in, I'll try to fix that. And I'll convert it back to linear. You got to convert to linear first, and then double wishbone. and then trailing arm. So trailing arm is for the rear. I believe that works pretty well. It rotates around a point kind of in the rear. I go over it in that video. Mainly, let's go Mac here for this. So mainly what you want to look for, you have your suspension diagram. And now you can see you kind of get some camber gain on compression. So you can do this no springs test. So no springs is basically just going to your bump stops, right? So you can go all the way to the floor pretty much. Crazy camber here. So I'm just gonna bring this back in a bit, lower arm length, so you can see that arm down there. I'm actually making that arm longer and shorter, right? So I can't remember what my values were. And actually, we haven't gone that far, so I am just going to load the car back up to fix everything I've done. We're back to where we were. So we look through, there's a few options you can choose from for suspension. But we won't dig into too much. You know, this is all suspension tuning. You can dive extremely deep. There's a huge rabbit hole you can go down. Any roll bars, we have included angles, your offsets, casters. If you go in suspension diagram, your inclination, we have scrub radius. And these all do play a huge part in how that car is going to feel if you're driving on a sim. I'll show you here now. So no springs test. So you can set your bump stops. So this is a key factor here. So a lot of people don't set their bump stops. So what you do is you can do no springs test. So set the car on the bump stops. And now that we're set on the bump stops, see this max up. So your front, you have max up for your front and you have max up for your rear. So there's two separate values. So I can choose how low these bump stops will go. So I can go so low, the wheel is actually off the ground. You would just bottom out on the car. So your max up would be so low that someone could leave the pits and slam the car so low that they would just be stuck. So if you want to do that, you can, but there's kind of repercussions for that, which obviously is not being able to move. If I set it, maybe this low, that looks pretty cool. But when you start compression, if you're in a race or you're taking a hard corner and the wheels compress or your suspension compresses, and we go to steering, you can see you're gonna get clipping. So your fenders, you're gonna have the tire, if you're on compression, through this kind of range, obviously till here. A little bit of steering, you'll be good, but you'll get clipping through your fenders, which doesn't look the greatest. Say you were drifting, and you were counter steering here at this ride height, you would be clipping through your fender. It doesn't look very good. We can turn the wheels. Let's turn them that much, and let's go back to suspension. We can still kind of mess with the max height. So we can almost get it if we really want. We can try to get it where our bump stops are exactly perfect. That this wheel, no matter what you do, this is on no springs. No matter what you do, it will not get any more compressed. You will be on the bump stop. So it gives you an idea that you will never, for your front at least, you will never clip the wheels. Now the rear is easier. So the rear, you're never really going to clip unless it's clipping outward. So if we had a bunch of offset in the rear, you could see that if I turn this off, we're not clipping, which our wheels are poking out a bit. But then if we went low, it would be clipping through the fender. This is a little easier for the rear because the rear doesn't have any turning, right? So it makes it pretty easy just to do your arm lengths, or if you're messing with your offset. But so we'll just bring it in. We'll just start going in, maybe till there. For the most part, that looks like if we had rolled fenders, that's a pretty good fitment when it's on max compression. And that's just setting your bump stops. That's a really good way, or something that a lot of people miss, but it's a really good way to keep your car looking good, riding as it should. It's kind of a good technique. Enough talk about suspension. We'll go down to allow now. We'll keep it moving. So open differential only. So these are allowances. So this is your mod. You can tell people what they're allowed to do, or what you allow the car to have. So open differential only. We want to have kind of a drift car, So if I did open differential only, it locks. Look, I can't do. My LSD is gone. So if I turn that off, now I can move back to my LSD. I have a viscous. I can do locked, or you can set it to be locked open diff if you like to. This is more of an economy car thing. Single setting differential. So now you can kind of get into the options you're allowed to have. So right now I have my power and my coast, right? But if I do a single setting, it just allows me to modify the locking. But I'm going to leave that off again. I'll leave it open. This is fine. Live adjust brake balance. So we're going to turn that off, and live adjust anti-roll. So that's stuff like we're getting into, later formula car stuff or open wheelers or these, kind of spec race cars and stuff. So maybe you want that option. You can turn that on. I'm gonna turn it off. So a little more bare bones, and we're gonna keep that off. There's no pit speed limiter. Handbrake, yes, but you can turn that off. You can say no handbrake. I mean, that's a race car thing as well. Sometimes no handbrake setup. ABS brakes, I'm gonna turn that off. I don't want any ABS. Rear brake only. I think I did that on the go-kart brake disc for the rear, but there's nothing in the front as if you built it yourself, at home. So I did, you'd only have rear brakes, no front brakes. But we won't do that. This is a normal S chassis. We have a horn, starter motor. If you say no to that, you basically just, you can kind of push start it, I think, if someone comes along and pushes you, but that's pretty much it. So you kind of want the starter motor. And limit setup lock to base setup lock. So I'll show you here now. If I go to steering, 38 degrees of steering lock. So if I go back to steering and I go full lock this way, 38, right? We have 38 degrees. So if I go back to allow, limit base setup lock to the base setup lock. So if I'm on the base setup, if I go to stock, you can see it's only at 38. We're maxed out. So we're maxed out here, maxed out here. But if I go back to base, you see that slider comes back. So I can actually give this car more. I can give it up to 60 degrees of lock. So if we're building a more high performance drift car or something with a modified knuckle, now if I go back to steering, I'm nowhere near the end. Now I have more steering lock to give. So I can have 60 degrees of steering lock. So we'll go back to allow. So I'll say yes, maximum lock is limited to 50 degrees. And that's what we have on our base setups. Now our other setups are only at 38. So we can crank them up to 50, put all these to 50. And now let's go down. So minimum tire and maximum tire. The minimum tire is actually the most grippy tire that you can use, and the maximum is the kind of the other spectrum of that list. So it's still grippy, but it's like off-road tires or hybrid tires. So if I go now to my tires, and I said, well, let's go, if I go more this way, the most grippy I can get, but will wear the soonest would be your slicks, R1 slicks. And we have some options, R2s, R3s, R4s. So if I allow that, and I'm fully maxed the other way too. So now if I go to my tires, and I was a player, if I went, okay, I want the slicks on my car, I could choose any option now of slicks. But if I go back and I actually take that off, so now I go plus and go to normals. Now when I try to do it, see, I can only cycle now between, my max now is normals. Because then once I get to the end of normals, it cycles me and makes me do a loop and puts me back to knobblies, right? Because it goes knobblies, hybrids, road normals. You can do road normal, road normal. So now players come in, they try to change the wheels at all, and they have no options. They can only use road normals. I should mention that these can be turned to no, that you don't specify tire type, so then they can just go wild. Or you can specify tire pressure limits. So again, you can turn that off. You can see now our pressures. We can go all the way up to 650 kPa. We can go 94 psi, all the way down to 0 psi. Next up, we have lights. This is where you choose the color your lights will display as. So as an example, we can see if we go to brake, I can click test. It'll display what the brake will look like in game. I can do it on and off. Tail lights when the running lights are on. We have left indicator, right indicator. And now I want to change the color of these indicators, so we can put test on right now. You see they're very orange. I'm just going to take our RGB sliders here. I'm going to go with the green to make it more yellow. So you can see my left side now is more yellow than the right side. So by holding control right click and then shift right click, I can copy and paste colors. Next we have the steering and driver tab. This will be for checking steering animation, steering wheel location, and wheel lock. By clicking A, you go into the animation studio. This is where you'll do all your animations for your driver and your passengers. So we've kind of already dove into steering a little bit. Just here at the bottom, we can get our range of motion. You can see the steering wheel actually spins and shows exactly lock to lock what that looks like. We have some options here. So concealed driver, most cars is yes. Same way with the open wheel, open roof cars, convertibles. And so you have your steering animation here. So this gets into animation. If you click A, you load into your animator studio, and this shows you each frame of this wheel. So right now, this the animation is not very good with this wheel. His hands are clipping through the stock wheel. right? So it's just all you gotta do is do one side. So if you do an animation for your full lock turning to the right, the game is automatically making duplicate frames, right? It's auto copy and flip is on down here, which is a neat feature. It's nice. You only have to do half of the work, and the game goes, okay, well then if you're turning the other way, it's the exact same motion. So here's the same hand over hand animation. It's all the bones and stuff. It's better not to overcomplicate it. It looks like it's more than it is, but it's really simple. So you have your QWE and you have your ASD. So it shows down here, QWE is rotate, ASD is slide. So if I hold A, oh, I'm not selecting a frame. So you can't be in between frames like this. You got to be selected on one of these. So I'm selecting the back of his palm, kind of back of his hand. If I hold A, S, or D, you can see that X, Y, and Z is changing. So if I hold A, I'm getting X. So I can't go up and down, but I can only go left and right. I can't go up, I can't go forward, but it's holding me in this X rotation. So I can change where the hand is. Then if I go Z, what I want to do is I want to kind of get his thumb in the pocket of the wheel. So I'm going to go Z a bit, move him up. So we're already looking a lot better. And I'm going to go, where's my Y? So I'm going to hold S for Y and move it back. And instantly, with a few motions, I mean, obviously maybe a little rotation back there, I'm going to change a few things, but you can see right away that I've now made it where for that frame, they will merge for frame 11 from frame 12 automatically knows that we want to merge, so that it'll create a linear path and kind of auto do that for you. So you can see frame 11, bang, when it hits frame 11, it moved the hand to the proper spot, but I haven't done the other frames yet. So frame 10 is still broken and frame 12 is still broken. So I'm just going to press escape and go back. So this brings us back to the editor. In the same way, so steering one way. So for your animation, we're doing 450 degrees, so it's 900 full lock. So we're going 450 one way, 450 other way. You can obviously adjust that. Steering wheel heading, so you can change the heading on this. So you can, for some reason, if you need the wheel to have a kind of an off heading for maybe a bus or something, this can be a something that you got to do. Or I'm not sure what you really use that for, but it is an option if you want to kind of get a weird steering heading on your steering wheel. Or if you have steering wheel pitch. So steering wheel pitch is kind of how you line up the wheel for your steering columns. So you can see here, I can adjust the pitch of the wheel. So you can have a completely 0 degree wheel, flat. But this is usually how it starts when you model your wheel. You model it flat. I'll show you in the editor that the wheel is actually flat. And then when you bring it out of the editor and we go to this vehicle editor view, you can kind of adjust your pitch to match, you know, what your steering is. And then we start steering. So you go, okay. You can steer it halfway and kind of match your animation if you need to change a few things, or if you already have an animation file saved that you want to reuse from a different car, maybe from the RB4, or, you know, one of the default liver speed cars have some animations that you can take from. And that's it. Trail reduction, horizontal. If we're going across like this axis of middle, we're not fully lined up. You can see how the points kind of line up right direct center of the wheel rotation. If I've moved the horizontal now for my trail reduction, I've moved the wheel forward for my steering. So when I steer, I'm steering around that point. So you can kind of get an idea. You can see that my wheel still moves forward based off that point. So you get kind of this trail is positive. So you've kind of, you know, if I go too positive, like reverse force feedback. So in game, the force feedback will feel worse at nothing and get lighter, like it's all kind of backwards. And then this one here will be, if you go too low, you go no trail, right? You're gonna have really weak force feedback through the wheel. You'll feel nothing. So I'm just gonna leave that normal force feedback, just so nothing is weird. Next, we have object positions and mass. For object positions, we're gonna want to turn on show frame so we can really see where all our objects are. This is basically just the weight of the driver, weight of the back seat, the engine, 12-volt battery, fuel tank, and a spare tire if it's included. We have some options. We have crankshaft axes. We can go long or transverse. By clicking that, you can see it swaps the engine around. We have rotation from the front, so the way the engine is spinning. We can go clockwise or anti-clockwise. We can create seat masses. So if I turn that on, you can see if it creates a physical representation of the mass of my front seats. We also have the option to turn off the passenger seat. These sliders let you play around with where the objects are in your vehicle. So if I want my driver to be more left or right, we can adjust that on the fly. We can adjust the engine to be more right or left, up or down, front or back. And you can see that actually changes the weight distribution of the car. Same with the fuel tank. We can move that up and down. We can have our fuel tank in the front of the car if we wanted to. It just lets you experiment and try different things or build whatever vehicle you like to. Continuing from object positions, we have mass. Same idea as objects. This is how you scale your frame mass, your fuel tank size, and your suspension mass constants. Scaling frame mass, you can see we can adjust the entire weight of the frame that we've created. We can also specify a fuel tank size. This can be selected to no and does a default of 30 kilograms, or we can say yes and change our liter size. This also updates the size of the object in real time. We can also change our suspension mass constant. This is the little weights you see on the wheels. So that would be like your hub and everything included, the coilovers or your suspension, struts and everything. So we can make that a larger weight or a lighter weight depending on the vehicle. For the aerodynamics tab, we can adjust the vehicle's aerodynamics. This lets you adjust the forces acting on the car. So in newtons, we have body drag, side drag, and the body lift. We also have a few other options. We can include a rear wing, a front wing, and an under tray. This is done in the editor, so it's not usable currently, but I'll show you that later. You can see if we adjust the body lift, our suspension will change. Negative values create more downforce on the body, which means your suspension has to be stiffer to counteract that force. Body drag and side drag is just your corresponding front and side views. The total surface area of your side is usually double that of the front. The Configurations tab allows mapping objects and triangles to appear and disappear on different selectable configurations. You can create multiple configurations of a vehicle, giving players options on how they want the model to look in-game. After you've had some time to make adjustments to your vehicle and tweak it to your liking, you can export the mod to test in-game. Driving the car in-game allows you to fine-tune the handling and see if there's anything you missed before uploading to liverspeed.net. After testing your mod in game, if you think it's ready for upload, you can go back to the editor and click the Export Mod for Upload button in the top right corner of your screen. Once the mod is finished exporting, a zip folder will appear in your LFS Editor files. Heading to lfs.net to upload our mod, we'll have to complete a few steps before we can put the vehicle up for review. Our mod will have its own skin ID. This is a unique 6-digit code that we must apply to the mod to allow skin mapping. When we enter the skin ID in the editor, we'll get an error. Skin ID is set, but the default skin was not found. We will have to create a default skin for our mod before we can upload. If you have gone through the trouble of skin mapping your mod, you will have a skin template that can be used for your default skin. This allows other players to create their own paint schemes and liveries to use on your mod. If you don't have any skin mappings for your mod yet, you can just use a blank square instead. Now that our mod has its own ID number, we can continue with the final steps of the upload process. Fill out all the required boxes, upload 5 screenshots of your mod, and complete the licensing and intellectual property areas. Then import that zip folder we created earlier into the vehicle mod archive. Congratulations, you just uploaded your first mod. Now you can't drive it online just yet. There is a review period where a selected group of mod reviewers will check your work and make sure everything is legal and good to go. If one of these reviewers finds that changes are needed to be made to your mod review will move from pending review to the changes required section when viewing your mods. And that's it. You now have your own personal vehicle mod in Live for Speed. In this video, we've covered all the basics to get you started on Live for Speed modding. Check out our other videos for more Live for Speed editor tutorials. Have fun modding.